This is the Talent, Sales, and Scale Show. Why would one person maybe choose outside sales as opposed to inside sales? I'll start with that and I'll have a couple of follow-up.
Great question. And so that option was never one for me. Actually, I take that back. I did. So let me go back to the beginning. I'll answer the question by telling a story. So I played minor league baseball for 2 years and 1 year in the Atlanta Braves organization. They're one of their A-ball minor league, and they fired me. So I've been fired by the Atlanta Braves. And so I kind of wear it as a badge of honor, but I say it was the greatest summer of my life. And so when I was done, I really didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. Baseball had been everything. And so when people say, "Where'd you go to college?" I said, "I went to William & Mary." And they said, "What'd you study?" And I said, "Baseball." I minored in sociology. My first passion was drawing and architecture when I was younger, but all the schools that had architecture that were good baseball schools, like the NC States, Clemson's, some of the bigger ACC schools, they weren't recruiting me. And so I went to a small liberal arts school that was very limited on what you could do for school. And so I really wasn't exposed to anything in college that I was interested in. And so my dad was in pharmaceutical sales, and I asked him, "Should I get in pharmaceutical sales?" He goes, "Absolutely not." He says,
what year was this? Because there was a major shift in around early 2000s that made pharmaceutical sales not as lucrative.
Yeah, this was around that because I graduated in 2001. So I'm in my 40s. And so my dad was on the tail end of his career. And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" And he said, "The industry is less about relationships with physicians and more about the bigger companies having television commercials." And I think some legislature changed where there wasn't always every commercial on TV was a pharmaceutical ad.
Right.
It used to be my dad would go and sit, and he sold to cardiologists. And it's one of the hardest to sell to. You're talking about the heart. They would sit down and they would have peer-like discussions, even though my dad was not a physician, but he was highly trained in the science and could answer any scientific question because my dad was literally studying nonstop when a new drug came out. I mean, at night, he was pouring through medical journals so that he could talk to cardiologists. Now in the pharmaceutical world, what they look for are people with backgrounds like enterprise because they want people that are already trained so they don't have to do that. They don't have to spend the resources and the time. Because the companies the last 3 medical companies that I worked for, I appreciate the opportunity that they gave me, but none of those companies invited me to the corporate office for training because I was hired, quote unquote, in between training sessions. They said, "Well, we'll get you in the next training class," which never happened. So basically I was pushed out into the field with my last 3 medical companies without going to the home office. I still to this day don't know what 2 of the home offices look like. I did go to a national sales meeting where I saw one of the home offices, but they basically send you like everything digitally. And I'm hearing a lot of companies are doing that now. And so that's one of the things that has really changed in outside sales is the training is just now more virtual. It's kind of, you do the training at home, your manager will come out and do maybe some role play. They'll maybe do like a day in the hotel lobby, and then you're out in the field. And then we'll bring you in later, which I don't think is really going to set people up for success. But going back to the topic and the question was, I went on some job interviews while I was bartending in the off seasons. And so I was done with baseball. I'd been released from 3 teams after 2 years, and I was just done. I was like, I don't want to be Crash Davis from Bull Durham and just play in the minor leagues until I was 35 and 40 years old. I didn't think it was going to happen. My goal is to get to the big leagues. I didn't see a path to get there. And so I hung up the cleats and hung up the spikes. And I didn't know what I was going to do. And so I looked in the Charlotte Observer and the classified ads. That shows you how things have changed dramatically because I'm only in my early 40s. But yet when I was looking for jobs, I was looking in the newspaper. Yep. And there were some inside sales jobs, et cetera. And when I went to them, you know, Bryan, I just didn't feel like it was me. I'm an outdoors guy. I'm an athlete. I played on grass. You know, I had the sun on my face. I was used to that. And so I think my personality, I just don't feel as if I wanted to sit and make a bunch of phone calls all day, which is kind of ironic that now 20 some years later, that's what I do with Rithm is I sit at my desk and I do podcasts and I make phone calls, and everything is usually through Zoom or through a phone call. So I think everything has kind of come full circle for me. But I think that when it comes to inside versus outside sales, which I've been talking for a little bit, I believe this was your initial question. I think it really comes down to your comfort level. When you are talking to somebody on the phone, it is a little less intimidating for both parties, although you're the invisible stranger. And this is one of the things that I had a sit down with Chris Beal, the CEO of Connect and Sell, and he talked about the invisible stranger and how we've been programmed, throughout life to not like the invisible stranger. And so if we were to meet in person, I see you walking up to me before we say hello. So there's a different comfort level. Whereas on the phone, you answer the phone, you don't know who it is, why they're calling, and what they're calling about. And so there's just an apprehension. And so if you're okay with that, if you're okay with starting on the inside sales part, and you're okay with it's a lot of failure. It's a lot of failure. It is a lot more repetitions than outside sales. And outside sales, you might have 10 to 20 calls in a day. But on the phone, I've heard that some of these companies can do dials up to 100, maybe 200. So it's just a lot more repetition. So it really just comes down to your personality. Do you like being out? Do you like meeting people in person? Or do you prefer kind of having more things more scripted, maybe more controlled in an environment like inside sales?
With outside sales, I mean, you were shut down for two years. I mean, we couldn't visit, and even now, travel and visiting is still up in the air. I mean, they're reducing the restrictions, but nevertheless, there's still a lot of companies that aren't back in the office. So isn't outside sales doing a lot of what inside sales people had to do anyway?
Yes, they are. And technology has definitely helped. I'll be honest, I had no idea what Zoom was until the pandemic happened. I don't think a lot of people did, especially in, the outside sales world. And what's really changed is the need for going all in on technology. Technology, we've never been more interconnected. And so it's not just technology like Rithm, which I can talk about in a second, but it's utilizing Zoom. It's also utilizing FaceTime. It's utilizing the phone. I mean, the phone is one of and by the way, yeah, I've got swag everywhere. The phone is one of the greatest tools and resources that we have today that my dad and his generation of sales professionals didn't have. Mm-hmm. My dad would roll up, he'd have bags of quarters in his car because he'd have to use payphones. I mean, think about that. Like, we're being able to communicate from, you're in Pennsylvania, I'm in North Carolina, very easily. We can see each other, which is awesome. And we're recording this, and then this is going to be set up as a podcast that people can listen to on their phone, et cetera. And my dad, just the turn of the century, or the, turn of the, millennia, whatever you want to call that, was still using quarters. Yeah. So it's pretty wild. And I think this is not slowing down. I think that what's going to happen in the future is outside sales professionals are going to start creating portals where they're going to have multi-prospect calls. And so instead of having just one person, you might have a webinar, and it's already happened on LinkedIn where people are having webinars, but I'm talking specifically of people that are experienced in outside sales. I think there's going to be webinars where interested parties across your territory can hop on the webinar, and you can multiply your efforts by having 6 to 10 prospects all on the call and having them collaborate about your product, your service, or your idea, while you have a chance to face-to-face answer those questions, as opposed to the traditional one-on-ones. And so going forward, it's going to be a hybrid.